the total length is about 25 minutes, and add 5 minutes question.
I used to have the flashy Adobe player to play your stuff.
Oh, really? I see. But I sent you a PDF version.
Yeah. All right. Anyway,
I will start. Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Yu-Chih, coming from University of Michigan. Today I want to present a research topic in vulnerability and protection of channel state information in multi-user MIMO network. Multi-user MIMO network has been formally published by IEEE in the last year. So with this new update, we found a vulnerability caused by the disagreement of the old wireless component that is still used in L2 diagonal AC. This vulnerability would be very serious since the market predicts this L2 diagonal AC protocol will be dominated in the near future. So this work is collaborated with Sihui, Dongyao, and Professor Kang Xin. We will first introduce, in this presentation, that is the background knowledge of the multi-user MIMO network. For example, the definition of the channel state information and the usage of it. Next, we introduce the attack protocol based on the vulnerability we discovered in this presentation. We evaluated the attack models in a real-world implementation, and then a countermeasure is proposed to mitigate the vulnerability we discovered. In the end, the related work and the conclusion is presented. So we first talk about what's the background knowledge of a multi-user MIMO network. What is the channel state information, what we call CSI? In wireless transmission, when the AP tries to transmit some data, say X1, the data is broadcasted in the air. So that means the received signal at the receiver, say receiver 1, is a combination of multiple delayed, reflected, and attenuated copy of original signal. So the receiver signal is Y1 equal to H11X1, rather than just X1. In this case, the H11 is what we call the channel state from the AP's antenna to this receiver. In the same way, if there is no receiver, then there is no CSI for him because they are located in different locations. The receiver signal at this receiver will be H12X1, which is different from the previous one because they have a different CSI. Okay, in a nutshell, CSI represents the physical transmission property at the receivers. So we talk about how the CSI can be used for technology called beamforming. To illustrate the idea of beamforming, we add one more antenna to the AP, send a signal X2. So now there's another set for the CSI because based on the definition we previously introduced, CSI represents the signal states from the AP's antenna to receivers. So the receiver signal at these two receivers will be a combination of all these send signals. To explain the principle of beamforming, we say that X2 is identical to X1. Apparently, this is a trivial setting because the AP can use another signal set to the second antenna rather than just send the same signal. But this setting helps to us to understand the idea of beamforming. That is, the received signal at the receiver 1 will be constructive because as we showed in this slide, both of these signals arrive at the receiver 1 at the same time, since the distance from receiver 1 to two antennas are identical. So the receiver signal have the same phase and the same direction of amplitude. Then the receiver signal at the receiver 1 is a stronger copy of the original signal. In the meantime, the received signal at the receiver 2 will be a destructive copy. Why? Because as shown in this slide, the signal sent from the first antenna travel a longer distance to the other receiver. We simply just assume this delay is identical to half of a wavelength. So the receiver signal will have an upside amplitude, making the receiver signal nearly zero. In high level, you can think the AP make a beam pointed to a receiver 1 and another beam contain the data of X1. So any receiver close to the location of a receiver 1 can receive a stronger copy of the signal, and any receiver close to the location of a receiver 2 just receive a weaker copy. One takeout here is that the beam can be controlled by the AP by different combination of the sender signal. For example, if we assume here that X2 now is a delayed version of X1, then the beam is rotated to a receiver 2. Since even H1 traveled for a longer distance to receiver 2, but the signal sent from the second antenna also be delayed at the same time based on the intentional delay at AP. So in summary, the characteristic of beamforming can be decided by different combination of S1 and S2 sent by these two signals, and that usually set based on the channel state information. For different purposes, in this presentation, we will introduce a specific one of them. That is multi-user MIMO network. The purpose of a multi-user MIMO network is to send multiple data, that's message, at the same time. For example, message N1 is sent for receiver 1, message N2 is sent for receiver 2. To do it, we first rewrite the equation, the channel equation, to a matrix form. Then, the AP can send these two messages via the two antenna by multiplying a precoding matrix, what we call the C. The entry in the C controls how much portion of the message N1 and N2 should be sent via these two antennas. A common selection in multi-user MIMO network is to choose the precoding matrix as the inverse of a channel, which makes the receiver signal at each receiver will be identical to N1 and N2 only. In high level, you can think the AP forms two bins. The blue bins contain the data of message N1, which is pointed at the receiver 1, while the green bins contain the data of message N2, pointed to receiver 2. The key here is the interference caused by message N1 to receiver 2 is 0, because apparently you can find, based on the equation, Y1 doesn't have any component of the message N1. In the same time, the interference caused by message N2 is also 0 at the receiver 1. So this kind of solution is what we call the zero forcing beamforming in multi-user MIMO network, which guaranteed that there's no interference for receiver not intended to receive the signal. And now, we finally go to our main topic of this presentation. It's not what we say, this whole process is vulnerable. First, remember, the channel state information represents the channel property at the receiver. So in downlink, only the receiver, the clients, know the estimation of this matrix. Thus, in L2 direct AC, they ask each client to estimate this matrix at first, and then feedback that to the AP sequentially. After the AP gets this feedback, he can pre-code the data as what we described before. However, we found if the receiver 2 is a malicious client, instead of reporting the genuine CSI, he can choose to report a fake one, what we call the forged CSI, F12 and F22. If the AP gets this feedback, he will think the matrix, channel matrix is similar to this form. Apparently, this is not a general channel matrix, and the AP will pre-code data based on this wrong estimation of channel matrix. That is, use the F inverse as pre-coding matrix. The first consequence of this forged CSI is the received signal is no longer identical to N1 and N2. Based on the derivation in our paper, we found the receiver signal will be looked like this. The takeout here is that the power coefficient, the PF, is controlled by the forged CSI. And the second rule for the signal is also controlled, K1F and K2F is also controlled by the forged CSI. What does that mean? It means if we forge the CSI properly, then we can shift the direction of the first beam. And then we can also scale one beam up and scale another beam down. So this vulnerability in multi-user MIMO network enable the attacker able to modify the direction and the amplitude of the beamformed signal. That could be a serious problem in multi-user MIMO network. Then we ask, what is the reason? What caused this vulnerability? The short answer would be the older wireless transmission component that's known as CSI feedback form. The reason is that there is no validation, so the AP just basically believes anything reported by clients. And the feedback is transmitted by plain text. There's no encryption, there's no protection on the feedback. It was a reasonable design, and it was okay before the multi-user MIMO network, because before multi-user MIMO network, AP just serve one client at one time. So there's no reason for client to report the wrong estimation of CSI, because you get no benefit, and you just degrade your performance in wireless transmission. However, after the multi-user MIMO network, as what we demonstrated before, the malicious client have a potential to affect the transmission to our clients just by forging the CSI. And this vulnerability will affect any protocol relying on CSI feedback. In this presentation, we choose two to present the attacks. That's physical security and power allocation, which are blue protocols.
Time out. When you say CS feedback, does not do validation and also provides in plain text.
Yeah.
You may want to add one or two sentences of why they're doing it. So you have to use this CSI feedback in real time.
Okay.
Okay. That's the reason why they do this plain text and also no validation.
Okay.
You could have the heavy-duty validation take a long time. Then by the time you use this CSI information for this access point to transmit, it's going to be too late.
I see.
So that's the reason why.
I will add it.
Yeah, you're going to add that.
Okay. So before we introduce how we break these two protocols, we need to first briefly introduce the idea of this physical security and the power allocation. What's physical security? The purpose of physical security in wireless transmission is to get rid of eavesdropping and without a crypto system. How to do it? This is an example of what we showed before, a standard multi-user MIMO network. They approved no interference to our client, not intended clients. Then some researchers found this property can be used as one way of the physical security. That is, zero interference implied no leaked information. For example, if the receiver 2 wants to sniff the data of message N1, he just can't because the data is nullified at him. You might find it is still dangerous because they might not receive not in the concurrent transmission. To avoid it, artificial noise is also added in the physical security. The idea is that even you can get the data, you get more noise than the signal you can decode. And the idea for artificial noise is that you need to ensure the ongoing transmission will not be affected by artificial noise. And this can be achieved as the beamforming technology, what we introduced before. So in conclusion, physical security has been proved without eavesdropping, and they don't need any overhead of a crypto system. That's good until we found a way to break them. Next, we will introduce our power allocation protocol. When we need a power allocation, since based on the FCC regulation, the total transmitted power is fixed. So that means if you want to scale some beams up, then you need to scale some beams down. There are many power allocations in wire transmission. In this presentation, we will mainly work on two most representative one of them. The first one is called equal power. The idea of equal power is to ensure the received signal and raw receivers are identical, so the fairness is maximized. For example, if we assure the receiver to have a higher CSI channel gain, then the EP power allocation will ask the AP to share more power to receiver 1, since he wants to help the receiver 1 has the same quality of a receiver signal. The next power allocation we're going to work on is maximizing throughput. On the contrary, the idea is to maximize the concurrent transmission sound capacity. So in the same example, the anti-skin will ask the AP to share more power to receiver 2, since he thinks the receiver 2 has a good channel, has more potential to maximize the throughput. Now we talk how the vulnerability can be used as a physical attack to attack the previous two skins, namely the sniffing attack and the power attack. We first introduce the idea of a sniffing attack. The purpose of it is that if we assume the receiver 2 is a malicious client, and he reported forged CSI to the AP, the purpose of this malicious client is to sniff the data of message N1. How to do it? As proposed in our paper, one possible solution is to choose the forged CSI as a linear combination of the original CSI to receiver 1 and the receiver 2. The idea for this selection is that we can rotate the first beams towards some direction, not always orthogonal to a receiver 2, as shown in this slide. So now the information of message N1 is leaked to receiver 2. However, even in this way, the receiver 2 still cannot decode the sniff of the message because there is still interference caused by M2. To enable the malicious client to successfully decode the message of message N1, a technology called signal cancellation is used by malicious client to remove the message of M2. After that, now the information can be decoded at the receiver 1 and receiver 2, even that data is protected by physical security. Artificial noise helps nothing because we select the forged CSI as a linear combination. So remember, artificial noise need to guarantee the don't affect the original CSI, have the original receiver have a CSI. So in the mathematical form, they will also guarantee no effect after this forged CSI. Next, we discuss how it's power attack. In the power attack, we also assume the receiver 2 is a malicious client. And the idea is he wants to get as much receiver signal strength as possible. Because if you do that, and you get selfishly more throughput. To do that, one proposal in this paper is to select a forged CSI as a weighted version of its original CSI. This selection is to ensure no interference from message N1 because we don't change the direction of the beam. We just scale it up or down. Then we have a simple example here. If both of these receivers have the same CSI channel gain, then based on what we introduced before, either in EP or NT, we ask AP to share the same power to them because they have the same channel gain. However, if we treat the CSI as we introduced here, in EP scheme, the malicious client can choose the weighted parameter W smaller than 1 to pretend that this malicious client have weaker gain. So the AP will think, you have a weaker gain, I need to share more power to you to ensure you have the same quality of a receiver signal. Now this receiver gets selfishly more power. Oh, it's cool. So the next one is for a maximizing throughput scheme. In this scheme, the malicious client try to cheat the weighted parameter bigger than 1 to pretend they have a strong gain. So in the same way, the AP will say, you have a strong gain, so I will show more power to you because you have more potential to increase the concurrent transmission. We implement these two attacks in a real-world setting and evaluate performance of them. We use the same simulations and we use the same environment setting. There's two antenna AP and transmit two data concurrently to two receiver. We also assume a receiver 2 is a malicious client feeding back the forged CSI. In the evaluation with the physical security, there's another sniffer not in concurrent transmission, and 1/4 of power of AP is used to send artificial noise. We implement the whole system in WAP test bed, which is composed by 50 WAP boards. WAP board is kind of software-defined radio, enable developer to process the signal processing by a high-level language such as MATLAB, and send the signal in the real world. We implement the AL2 direct AC-like protocol. That means we use the same OFDM modulation and the 64 subcarrier over 20 MHz. For each CSI setting, there's 300 trials of transmission to evaluate the system. So to know if the significant attack can work in the real world, we first use an illustrative example here. That is, we transfer the image via WAP test bed to a receiver 1. As shown here, you can find some errors in this image because we don't implement any error correction code. Now, here is the image sniffed by sniffer 2. Apparently, this is not related to the sender image because the data is nullified at the receiver 2. And here is the image received at receiver 3. As what we introduced, even the image is linked to receiver 3, but he received more noise than the image, so he is unable to recover the original image. However, we found, based on our introduction, if the malicious client can cheat the CSI correctly, then he can have a high probability to recover the original image. So the second and the third image show how physical security works to protect the wireless transmission without a crypto system. That's cool. But the latest image shows that how we break the whole physical security system just by forging the CSI properly. This is an example of a single transmission. Next we examine what's the overall performance by the signal-to-noise ratio. Signal-to-noise ratio, as known as SNR, represented how much meaningful signal you received compared to the noise. So overall, this is the signal-to-noise ratio of a receiver 1, which is between 5 to 15 dB. And here is the signal-to-noise ratio received by receiver 2 and receiver 3. They are basically 0 because of physical security. In average, there is a 9 dB degradation that is used to believe in previous work safe in wireless transmission without eavesdropping. However, as we proved in our paper, if the receiver has a way to forge a CSI properly, then he can have an exact same capability to decode the image sent for the intended receiver. As shown in the right hand here, The detail of the derivation will be included in our paper. And next, we examine the performance of our power attack. In our power attack, we use a matrix called increase the capacity. That is define the capacity after you treat in CSI and minus the capacity before you treat the CSI in a ratio. So what's the performance of power attack in EP scheme? Can the malicious client really increase their receiver capacity? The answer is true. So in the EP scheme, the average, the receiver tool treat the CSI properly with W parameters smaller than 1 can has a 20% capacity gain. This is significantly wire transmission, and this 20% gain is actually stealing power from another receiver. So for receiver 1, there's a 40% degrade for their capacity. We found a similar behavior in the anti-scheme, but there is a more interesting result here. That is, the overall performance of the power attack in anti-scheme is not as significant as what we showed in EP scheme. There's just 30% of transmission get a higher capacity, more than 20%. The reason for it is that, remember, the precoding matrix is set as the inverse of the channel matrix in multi-user MIMO. Then we need to treat a bigger W in anti-scheme. That means we have a large entry in channel matrix, and we get a small value in the precoding matrix, in the precoding entry. So that means this property offset the power we steal from the AP, which offset that property, making nearly 80% of the transmission doesn't have a significant gain. However, we still notice that there are a few possibilities, this 30%, they can have a significant increase of capacity. Why? Because in these cases, the AP is going to remove the power of malicious client. Because AP thinks your channel gain is too low. In these cases, the malicious client can use the cheated CSI to regain the power back from AP and make a significant increase of their capacity. Another point we should mention here is that no matter in EP scheme or anti-scheme, no matter how the performance look like, almost all the reward if you treat the CSI rightly is always positive. That means if you know how to treat the CSI and you can, why not? You have a strong incentive to do it to increase your capacity just by forging the CSI. Then we discuss how can we stop this attack. That's what we proposed, CSI sec. The first question people might ask is that why not encryption? How about we just encrypt the CSI feedback before we feed it back? We will say yes. If you can encrypt the CSI before you feed back, then you will be able to stop a sniffing attack because clients need to know the CSI correctly so they can forge the CSI based on that. But there are two main problems for this encryption. The first one is that you need additional overhead. So now you still need the key exchange encryption and decryption. Take the physical security as an example. They use it to prove they don't want this overhead. But if you want physical security to work and you add this encryption, then you get this host back. So that's another ideal solution. The second reason for it is that for this encryption, you need to modify both the AP and the client side. Over the world, there are more than 7 million AP versus 8 billion of the phones. So that's significant. And you need to modify all of them at one time to ensure the CSI feedback is secure.
Yeah, I think as I said, not only that, the compatibility is an issue. The other one is time.
Oh yeah, time. I know.
Time cost.
Yeah, I will mention that. Okay.
Depending on how much of encryption you want to have, you can have certain. Anybody looked at Krishna? Did you look at the impact of latency in the availability of CSI feedback? If it's delayed by say X milliseconds.
Yeah, it affects a lot.
Yeah, it's going to affect a lot. You called, what's the name of it? You looked at this before.
Yeah. So when you have mobility,
yeah,
you have channel aging, CSI aging.
But you have a coherent record.
So I would say that.
You have a CCON paper on that, right?
No,
mobile paper. You can look at his mobile paper.
it's CSI aging.
Yeah, CSI aging.
Yeah.
I saw it as one of them made by Rice. They say if the CSI is delayed more than 20 milliseconds, the performance is half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad actually.
Yeah. So I will mention that.
Yeah. Depending on how much of the encryption decryption you do,
that's right.
It's gonna add to this aging.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's a good reason why they do this simple plain text CSI.
Mm.
I think that's one of the reasons why. Or they didn't think of this this problem. Okay.
Okay, so in contrast to this with so much overhead, our idea is to propose a way called the CSI sec to prevent the CSI forgery attack just with minimal overhead. How to do it? So with the CSI sec, secure the CSI feedback process, it also without the crypto systems, no overhead here. And we only need a modification at the AP rather than all clients. So that's a significant saving because it's 7 billion versus 8 billion more. How can we do it? In the CSI, before the CSI sec, this is the CSI feedback for if CSI feedback flow defined in AL2.11ac. The AP will first transmit some known sequence to the receiver that is known as a pirate defined in AL2.11ac. And the receiver divided the receiver signal by this known sequence to an estimation of the CSI. Feedback this CSI back to AP, and the AP precoded based on this estimation of CSI. The only modification made in the CSI sec now is the AP. They don't use a known sequence anymore. They use an unknown sequence. It's kind of a secret, keep it secreted at the AP. So now the receiver signal at the receiver will be look like this HU plus noise. Then the estimation of the CSI is no longer an unbiased estimation of a real CSI. So basically it's a wrong estimation. All the clients just don't know what the CSI is anymore. And then feedback this wrong estimation back to AP. We know that the AP needs a true estimation of a CSI to make it a pre-coding, right? So how to do it? AP can re-estimate the CSI by multiplying by K and divided by U. Only AP will be able to do it because the U is the unknown sequence kept secret at AP. After this re-estimation, the AP will use this re-estimation to transmit the data. So the main idea of the CSI sec is that the AP uses the unknown sequence U to make everybody don't know what's the estimation of the CSI, but only AP know. So basically, clients cannot treat the CSI smartly as what we do before because they can estimate their own CSI right, and they can even not sniff other people's CSI because even that people don't know their CSI. The detail of the performance of the CSI sec will be included in our paper. And next, we show what is related work and what the conclusion of this presentation. Okay, so here's the related work. We are not the first one proposed attacks against the physical security and the CSI. The most close one to us is a paper published in DSS 2014, which is known as a known plaintext attack. Their idea is that they establish a lot of sniffer around the receiver, and they assume the plaintext, the signal sender is already known at the malicious client, so they can recover the artificial noise used at the transmitter. Our paper is different from them because we actively forge on CSI rather than passively recover the artificial noise. So our attack is more efficient. For example, we just need one sniffer with one antenna, then we can sniff the data. Second, we guarantee that receiver signal has the same probability to recover the original image as the intended receiver. Third, we don't need the assumption of a known plaintext. That's a strong assumption because that might not be true in some various transmission. The attack with falsified report matrix is also not novel. In the GSN, there is a falsified report of a page request for DDoS attack. In the LT, there is a falsified report CQI for gaining more transmission opportunity. In the virus transmission, there is also one forged uplink features to break the uplink authentication system. However, this paper is the first one to exploiting multi-user MIMO precoding based on the forged CSI. In conclusion, this paper proposed a vulnerability caused in the disagreement of the old virus transmission component, that is CSI feedback 4. And we use this vulnerability to propose two attacks, namely sniffing attack and power attack. We also evaluate them in the real-world implementation. To stop this attack, we propose a way called the CSI sec that will be able to secure CSI feedback 4 without crypto systems and only need modification at AP. So that's the end of this presentation. Thank you for your listening.